Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to Spigot Office Hours. My name is Scott Kinnear, and I lead our Learning and Enablement team here at Spigot. First off, thanks for taking some time to join us and learn more about crafting a challenge question and planning for communications and incentives. Before we get started, a few housekeeping items. First, you may ask questions using the chat or Q&A feature in the Zoom panel. Additionally, if this is a small group, we'll open up participant audio so you can join the discussion directly. You should be able to mute and unmute your line at will. We just ask that you stay muted when not talking to avoid background noise. The general flow of this session will be as follows. First, we'll discuss how to determine the intent of a challenge, and then go into semantics and crafting the challenge itself. Then, we'll discuss communication planning and incentives. Depending on your appetite for learning, there are additional resources available, such as our Learning Center, where you have 24/7 access to program and technical related lessons, our Help and Support Center, where you can view articles, chat with our support team, and create tickets if needed, and finally our Professional Services team, where you can simply pay us to do the work for you. Okay, let's start with an example challenge process to help set the stage. When considering the focus of a challenge, it's important to ask yourself and your potential sponsors some tough questions to determine if it's worth your audience and your own time to solve. If the answer is no to any of the questions, it may not be worth pursuing. Remember, people are busy. Use their time wisely. Consider convening a group of these committed business sponsors or having a discussion with them individually to discuss the intent of the challenge. When meeting with sponsors, you may have already realized that some come prepared with a challenge question and others may need some guidance. This exercise is something that you can do with your potential sponsors when you want to determine the top value questions to pursue. The overarching concept of this model is that each axis relates to an essential area of focus for the business. In my example, I have associate experience on the x-axis, customer experience on the y, and the product or service offering on the z-axis. Now, let's add a few more attributes. Each focus area has direct and indirect impacts. For example, engagement is a soft metric of associate experience that indirectly leads to financial impact, whereas productivity implies a more direct financial impact. Additionally, satisfaction is the soft metric, and revenue would be the hard metric. On the z-axis, differentiation may be the soft metric and pricing the hard. This model can be used to facilitate a conversation with committed sponsors by discussing each axis and listing potential opportunities for each axis. For example, I may start with, how might we improve productivity in work groups? Or, how might we increase associate engagement? Or even, how might we promote our product to break into new markets? Versus what sets our product apart from the competition. After completing this exercise, you'll have a better understanding of where to focus your efforts and perhaps even a pipeline of challenges to begin working from. Forming the verbiage for a challenge question is part art, part science. The balance is struck between aligning the question to the intent of your challenge while determining the level of transformation the team can realistically manage. To put this into context, let's say you work for a hand soap company and aligned on the intent to run a product-focused challenge. First, consider this challenge question, quite convergent in nature. How might we, through washing, minimize the bacteria people have on their hands? This idea would work great and probably result in new product formulations and methods, getting incremental value. Now let's move closer to a transformational and divergent question based on the same intent. How might we reduce the transmission of bacterial diseases within the home? Notice how the first question focuses on the means, i.e. washing our hands, and the second question focuses on the desired end goal of reducing bacterial disease transmission. The second question may lead to completely new products or even ideas breaking into adjacent markets, which may have tremendous value, but will likely also be harder to implement. Framing the challenge question helps the audience reduce uncertainty and focus on the objective. a simple technique to use is how might we increase or decrease the factor we're trying to impact in order to achieve our goal. For example, how might we increase new sales revenue in order to achieve our $1 billion global target? A few other considerations when forming a challenge question. Incremental type questions often lead to fewer ideas, but those ideas are easier to implement, whereas transformational type questions often lead to more ideas, but those ideas are harder to implement. A new program can get some quick wins with incremental challenges. An always-on environment is a great place to ask transformational questions. Avoid using acronyms and technical jargon whenever possible, and ensure a sponsor owns the focus area of the challenge and is committed. When needed, provide your audience with additional challenge context to provide background on the intent and importance of the challenge question. Now that we understand what opportunity we intend to solve, let's discuss how to get the audience involved. First, the basics. A good challenge communication plan includes 4 primary components. Let's start at 1 o'clock with the audience. In other words, who's receiving the communication? Will all participants need to be notified of the challenge? Perhaps only those who have not participated should be emailed at the end of week 1, or maybe experts need a prompt to start their reviews. Next, consider which channels are being used and who will send the communication. Do you have any town halls coming up? Is digital signage available, or can you put posters on the walls? Does facilities need to be involved? Do you have remote employees? For example, the launch communication is typically the most impactful when coming from the sponsor or senior level executive. System emails are okay for reminders and notifications, but don't usually get the same attention. Generally speaking, the more channels, the better, and also feel free to get creative and use channels that may not be typical. Moving on, timing. When do we communicate? A common pitfall is to only communicate at the start and the end of a challenge. It's equally important to communicate when you have a behavior you're trying to drive. For example, after the challenge launches, you may want to remind users midweek to increase ideation, or in week 2 to promote voting and commenting. Monitoring activity levels using the challenge management dashboard and tailoring your communications to drive needed behavior is ideal. And keep in mind, using multiple channels will allow you to communicate more often without spamming the users via email. The last, but perhaps most obvious, what are we actually communicating? This is the content or message that needs to be conveyed to the audience. In some cases, like midweek communications, this will need to be determined based on participation. In other cases, like the launch message, this can be prepared. Search our Help Center for communication examples and drafts if you need some help getting started. Once you've considered the 4 elements of your communication, it may be useful to create a plan and a calendar so everyone is on the same page and you could be prepared for execution. For example, here we have a sample plan that highlights each communication and all of the 4 elements. We can then map those communications on a calendar and share it with the communications lead and the challenge team so everyone's on the same page. For example, here we can clearly see that we have a launch communication going out on the 9th and behavior reminders midweek until the end of the challenge. In addition to the example challenge plan, we've also provided some poster and desktop templates in the Help Center that can easily be customized for your use if needed. Once you've planned your communications, it's important to review the system notifications available from the email templates section as an administrator. First, update the reply to email address to ensure you receive replies to system notifications. You can also disable all emails directly from here if desired. Next, review each grouping and associated emails. Select a specific template when you wish to modify it. Here's an example of the challenge update email. Selecting the I icon in the upper right will display the scenario in which the notification is sent. For example, this notification is sent to all members of a challenge when a new idea is posted within the last 24 hours. In most cases, the subject line, and message body can be edited, and HTML is supported in the body. At the bottom of each template, you will see an active checkbox, which enables or disables each individual email template from being sent. Some emails will support variables that automatically enter dynamic information, such as the idea title or the user's name. Click the Show Variables link under the message body to see what variables are supported for that email template. For more detailed information on email variables, please visit the Help Center. A few considerations when dealing with communications. Align with your program branding whenever possible. Use multiple channels, but remember that launch and other important communications are most effective when coming directly from the challenge sponsor. Review all your system notifications before you launch, and visit the Help Center for a list of common settings, examples, and templates. Don't forget to whitelist Spigot email server IP addresses with your IT team to ensure emails are delivered within your organization and don't end up in spam or junk boxes. And remember to update the Reply To field on the email settings page. The last topic for this session is incentive planning. Recognition and incentives increase overall participation, associate satisfaction, and drive desired behaviors within a challenge. There are two types of incentives, or motivators: intrinsic, which bring personal or physical benefit, and extrinsic, which are incentives or rewards that bring financial or material benefit. Here are some examples of each. Feel free to borrow from this list, however, it's best to understand your audience, company, and regional culture before determining what might work best for you. The last step is to create an incentive plan based on the behavior and timing you're attempting to promote. For example, in the earlier phases of a challenge, we often need ideas, comments, and votes. It may make sense to offer an incentive for the highest number of ideas in week 1, while later in the process, we may want to focus on idea quality. Remember that simple recognition in weekly communications is a great intrinsic motivator and a very inexpensive way to drive participation. To sum up the session, let's review some incentive best practices. First, engage your sponsor and ask that they allocate budget, time, or in some cases both, to help recognize the audience and challenge team members. In some cases, you may have a formal recognition program in place that you can tie into. Second, intrinsic motivators tend to work best over the long term. Remember to create a blended incentive program rather than just simply handing out gift cards for top ideas. And last, consider the regional and departmental culture when planning your recognition program. That concludes our presentation for today. We'll now open things up for Q&A.